So, and if we could just, Mike, if you could just send us a note, if you're able to, through the chat, just give me a thumbs up or an okay that we're going.
I don't know if we are.
No,
live.
different mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mike. It's a different mic.
Apologies.
We have the thumbs up, Judge Albus. So we are live streaming.
All right. This is the meeting of the Standing Committee on Guardians Ad Litem and Attorneys for the Minor Children in Family Matters. We have just begun to broadcast by live stream. Before we did so, the committee took the roll, approved the minutes of the last meeting, and then entered an executive session for the purpose of discussing a complaint seeking the removal of someone from the list of approved Guardians Ad Litem and AMCs. By our rules, those discussions of the probable cause panel's findings are confidential unless and until there's a finding of probable cause. Now that we're back in public session, it would be appropriate for someone to make a motion either to adopt or reject the recommendation of a finding of no probable cause in complaint number GAL AMC 22-0001. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, I'll just be clear. I gave two options to accept or reject. So if your motion could specify which.
I apologize,
Right.
Your Honor. Yes, I would move that the full panel accept the recommendation of the probable cause panel to dismiss the complaint.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Is there any discussion without naming any parties to this matter before we vote? All right, then all those in favor of accepting the recommendation of the probable cause panel in this matter and dismissing the complaint signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, then the complaint is dismissed for lack of a showing of probable cause. The next item on the agenda is item 3, changes to the active list of persons qualified to serve as a guardian ad litem or attorney for the minor child. And Damon, I believe we had one request for reinstatement to the list. Is that right?
There was one request, Judge Albus. We received an email last Wednesday, April 20th, from attorney Michelle Sigfridson, indicating that she was requesting of the committee to be reinstated to the active list, that her name was removed from the list back at the beginning of 2020 because we did not receive a response to our annual request for updated information that was sent out in the middle of November of 2019. Attorney Sigfridson states that she believes that this may have happened because she had left her old firm back in July of 2019 and therefore did not receive the request. And I can anecdotally confirm that that the email from attorney Sigfridson did come from a different email address than what we had in our database. So that would seem to be accurate. She indicates that she still meets all of the criteria set forth in practice book section 25-62 subsection B, and that she meets all of the training requirements set forth in practice book section 25-62 subsection C subsection 1. She said she's willing to accept cases on a sliding fee scale and would be willing to contract with the Division of Public Defender Services for state rate cases paid by the state. And she indicated a need for GALs at the moment in Windham County. She is requesting reinstatement.
Great. Thank you, Damon. And just for those who may be viewing on the live stream, the committee maintains a list of eligible persons, and to gain initial entry on that list, there's required training and other criteria that one has to meet. And then there's an annual update of that list where an email is sent out to everyone on the list, essentially asking that they update their information. Sometimes those emails aren't responded to because someone changed firms, as we have here, or there was an email issue, or for some other reason. And in such cases, those persons can request reinstatement simply by verifying that they continue to meet all the requirements. So it's not uncommon that we get these requests. Is there a motion to reinstate Attorney Sigurdsson to the approved list?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? And all those in favor of reinstatement signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, then it's unanimous that she is reinstated to the approved list. Thank you. The next item is the process for persons to complete the required training that I just mentioned by viewing the recordings of the most recent training. And at our last meeting, we had some discussion about the most recent training and how it was filmed in its entirety, in part with the idea that we might be able to use the videos at some point to facilitate giving training in the future without necessarily having to reassemble all of the instructors. And we hadn't really gotten to the point of setting forth a particular process for using those videos, but a request came in as to whether they might be usable. And Attorney Hamilton from the Public Defender's Office, which essentially by practice book rule is charged with presenting that training, was going to look into it and give it some thought about how we might develop a program to use the videos to satisfy the training requirement. And I think in particular to figure out a way to make sure that those who viewed it really did view it in its entirety. So I'll ask Attorney Hamilton if she's had any time to devote to that or thought that she might have on it.
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. So we did sort of outline a process for how we could administer this training by allowing, applicants to view the recordings. All of these sessions, just by way of background, by practice book rule, there needs to be 20 hours of training, and it's a curriculum that's approved by the full standing committee. Last summer, due to COVID, we did offer that training in a virtual format only, but it was a live training in the sense that the participants had to log on to each of the recordings. The presenters presented just like this kind of a format. We were able to verify that folks stayed on in the training throughout the entire time frame. We broke that up over 8 separate 2-hour training blocks, which equated with 16 hours of instruction, and then we had 4 hours of homework. So it was a little bit of a hybrid last year, but there was a way to better track, I think, the full participation and be able to verify that people did participate in the full training curriculum. Our intent to try to do something this summer, again, without requiring us to pull all the speakers back in and do it. We hadn't done it. I want to say it had been several years in between the last live in-person training and the one we did last summer. So we did have enough people to actually, warrant having a full training curriculum again. This summer, we did not anticipate that there would be as much of a demand for a brand new training class. I think we had, I forget the total if either Liza or Justine remembers, but it's been usually ranging between 30 and 50 people in the trainings when we've had them in the past. So our thought for this summer was going to be to set up a process whereby we would post a registration form. The registration form would be similar to what we used last year. People would have to qualify to participate in the training, thereby, basically based on the practice book requirements for who can be an AMC GAL. Once the folks register, we would create a link that would only be available to those whose registrations were accepted. The registration link would provide access to all of the recordings, all of the written materials, as well as all of the homework. The only thing we're struggling with or trying to verify at this point with our IT folks is whether or not there would be a way to verify once the link was made available to the registrants that they actually did in fact spend the amount of time to complete the training. We certainly would do a self-certificate, just like I sort of equate it with what we do for the MCLEs, in a sense, self-certifying. We have a self-certification form that we would use that actually includes all of the full agenda, all the documents, all the homework, all the recordings that they would self-certify that they completed. And you know, as Judge Elvis mentioned, all of the recordings, but there was one of the days, 1 2-hour session was not, I think mistakenly not recorded. The recording, we could not access it. That was day 3 on child development. We do have the full PowerPoint that the presenters use to do that training. So, you know, we could utilize that, or I could potentially have the 2 speakers just record, you know, that separate training. But all of the other trainings are available for viewing. And so my thought was, and I do apologize, I didn't have, well, I can't say I didn't have time, because it really, I looked back and our last meeting was January, so I don't know where the time goes, but I hadn't pulled together, I had not yet pulled together our training subcommittee. But my thought, if the full standing committee was in agreement, that we could plan to post the registration form. That most folks are used to this training always being provided in the summer. So my thought would be if we could post the registration link sometime next month, early if we can, process those registrations and provide at least through the end of June for people to actually register, do the 20 hours, and then self-certify completion, that we could have this done in the same annual time window that we have tended to have these trainings in the past. And the last thing I would just note is, you know, we can decide as a committee, I think, ultimately, whether or not we want this to be, certainly we'd like to do the next training in person, you know, barring any major, you know, issues with COVID, when we have a larger class available to actually do an in-person 20-hour training like we have in the past. But in the meantime, we could keep the access to the this. I don't want to really call it a virtual training, because it's really more of a viewing of the recordings and reviewing of all the materials. We could make that available on an ongoing basis depending on the demand for AMC GALs. And we don't have to decide that today, but we are prepared to move forward with this type of a process. And I know I know we discussed it, as you said, Judge Elvis, at the last meeting. I think the committee was comfortable with that. The only issue, unless our IT people can figure out a solution, it would be self-certifying that they spent the full 20 hours. They will certify they did that, but there's not really an automated way for us to verify that they spent that much time completing the workshops. So I would just, I guess, close with that and then open it up for any questions or issues or concerns or anything that we hadn't thought about.
Any questions or suggestions or ideas?
I had a thought.
Yes, Nisa.
So is my understanding correct that the training consists of a number of videos along with a PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So some of the presenters, they're all recorded except for 1 2-hour session. Some of the presenters use PowerPoints as well, and other training materials.
So one suggestion I would have to pose to your IT people is that there's a software out there. I remember we used this when I was doing trainings back in judicial called Storyline. And that was a place where you could embed the various PowerPoints and videos and make it into one presentation and be able to track completion that way. So like at the end of it, whoever signed up for it would just hit that they've completed the training program, and then you'd get verification, whoever the creator was, that they've actually completed the entire program. So that's just one suggestion to, like, you know, if I don't know how feasible it would be to get that type of software, but that is something that would be able to track completion.
That's great. I appreciate that. Is it, if you know, is it, because I know that we had talked, I think at one of our meetings too, similar other judicial trainings that folks have had to go through. At the end, you kind of like get a certificate that you did it. I don't remember if it actually tracks that you did the full amount of the time. I think that was one of the questions for the committee, was that you were logged on for the entire, just say 16-hour period. But I think it's certainly something to look into, because that's, I would love to be able to, I feel a little more confident if, I think it's fine to self-certify, but it'd be nice if, like you said, we also had an automated way of saying that somebody, actually stayed logged in for the full amount of the full length of the video training.
I know
So we'll look into that.
I know I've done at least one of those, and the way it was set up, once I started it, I couldn't fast forward, I couldn't skip. There were checkpoints where you had to do something. You also couldn't walk away for 3 hours and come back. There's no guarantee somebody's intently watching constantly, but there were things I had to do to advance it at certain points, and I couldn't advance it prematurely. So I think, Nisa, is that the software you're talking about?
It is, right. So you'd be able to, you'd have to hit next slide or next piece. So you couldn't just play and then walk away. I mean, there'd have to be some involvement or staying on track of the training.
Okay.
I don't know what the expense of that would be, or whether the software that exists, whether the license would allow this committee or the public defender to use it.
Okay.
And it also seems like that may take some time to figure out. And I don't know if we go with self-certification once, just to be able to offer it this year before we have all those answers, and then try to refine it, or whether we want to wait until we have that in place.
Well, if it would be helpful, of course, just like I think a lot of our organizations are undergoing some major staffing transitions. So we have a whole new team of IT folks, including our IT director, who's been on board, just been on board for a few weeks at this point. But why don't I check in with them to see how familiar, maybe, and they come from, one of them, the new director comes from a private company, and perhaps they have some expertise as well with utilizing that type of programming. And then I can report back even via email to the group if that's helpful, to see if that's something that would be doable from a cost standpoint and potentially a timing standpoint. But I think that would be wonderful if we can verify and set it up in that fashion. I will look into that.
Any other questions or comments?
Mike and Susan, just kind of along those lines, I was going to share the same experience that Judge Albus and Nisa shared. I know that there are programs that require keystrokes or affirmative action throughout the program in order to move through the program to try to keep people engaged. Might have a little concern about, without that, or just the self-certification, offering that on an ongoing basis, because then I fear that people would do that instead of the in-person, which I think we would all agree is probably the most valuable. So I think I'd be comfortable in it as an interim measure, but I don't know that I would want to sort of proactively sign off on that on an ongoing basis. I would hate to have the in-person program fall by the wayside because people used.
Yeah, I would agree, Your Honor. I think that I think my understanding was this was just going to be an interim measure. I 100% agree. I think it's much more, valuable to have the interaction with the presenters. And so I think it was more a matter of doing something, perhaps potentially even just this year, until we can kind of get people back together and pull together a larger group of new AMC GALs. So I agree 100% with you on that. And I think that was the intent of the group.
Anyone else? Any other comments or questions?
I just have a question regarding who we're going to qualify. So it was licensed attorneys and licensed mental health professionals. We did make an exception for recently graduating law students. Are we going to continue that exception? Have we had that conversation?
Yeah,
We did that last time.
We did. And my thoughts on this option are that it's a good option to have now, especially since it's still uncertain how many big in-person events we can really plan. I also think going forward, while I agree we need to retain the in-person training, as Susan mentioned, there have been times where we have not offered that training for years at a time, and that's probably too long, but there certainly could be a need for more GALs to be certified, especially in certain areas in between our trainings. And if we had this as sort of an alternative to use on a case-by-case basis in between live sessions, if it's got some safeguards in it, I don't know that I'd say we'd never use it again. And as far as, I think we made the exception for the law students for the training because it was the first one we'd done in a while. We didn't know when we'd do another one. I'm fine with continuing that as a policy for the live trainings, that if someone is on the verge of getting whatever professional degree they would need to work as a guardian ad litem, that they could take the training. They obviously still can't get on the list until they get their degree, but it may prevent them from having to wait a year or two after they get the degree to take a course. For the video course, I'm not sure why we would make the exception and let someone do it that way if they couldn't serve yet anyway. Maybe let them wait until they have their degree, and if there's still no in-person event coming up soon, maybe then we let them take it. But I could see using this in a couple of ways going forward, even if we're back to normally doing it in person. So I don't know what others think about that.
As I recall, Your Honor, right, we had made an exception to it last year just because by the timing of when we were going to be administering the training, there would be some, and we did limit it to 3Ls and graduate students in those disciplines who were in their final year because we were concerned that they might miss that opportunity and have to go a year or longer. But I think you raise a good point that if we are going to, at least for, let's just say for sake of argument, that we're going to, for the next, 12 months, just make this available, those folks, I suppose, could do it as soon as they become eligible to be on the list. They wouldn't have to wait to do it. Is that how I understand your feedback?
Yes. In other words, my thought is if we're doing a large group at one time, whether it's live or virtual like last year, I think the exception makes sense to let those people get into the class. If going forward, we have this module available for individuals to use because they'd like to get on and it's going to be a long time before the next in-person or large group virtual is done, we'll let them use it for that purpose. But I don't, in that second instance, I don't see the need for the exception as much. Because they can wait till they have their degree and then take it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I probably confused it the way I explained it back, but I do think that makes sense. And we wouldn't be, precluding anybody from ultimately doing it once they're eligible, because they'll have access to it immediately.
So just to be clear, we all know this has real implications for the law center. So a May graduate would wait until after they've sat and been sworn in, sat for the bar and then been sworn in before they could then apply to take the virtual training. That's what we're saying.
That's not exactly what I meant. So let's go back to Susan's suggestion, and I didn't explain it very well. If in fact we have the kind of registration period, register now, you have to complete this by the end of June, it's all by video. I don't see a reason in that case not to make the same exception we made last year. Okay. What I meant is once this year is over, assuming in the future we're going back to in-person as the rule, but we have this video module available in between times if there's a need
Okay.
that could be given to one person or two people without the mass registration. I think for that, I'd be inclined to say, we'll give it to you as an individual when you have all the other requirements, namely your degree. But if someone has to wait for a class and there might not be another one for a while, I think it makes sense to let them take the class ahead of getting their degree if they're on the verge.
And I'm also comfortable, if the committee agrees that at least right now we're doing it as in this way, that we wouldn't have to necessarily shut off the link and access to the registration to do this remotely on June 30th. I mean, we can keep it active. We will process the registrations here, and so that as soon as somebody becomes eligible, they can take it, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't have folks who are going to go long periods of time without actually having access. So I wouldn't want to, I guess, to your point, Justine, about current law students, just say 3Ls who will not have yet taken the bar exam or haven't yet completed classes even potentially. I would be okay with them taking it in this, registering and actually taking the training, just as Judge Albus was indicating. It's, I mean, I don't know we would have to cut this off. I was mentioning June just because June tends to be when we offer this. So I think people will be looking to do it in the summertime this year at some point. But we wouldn't necessarily have to close the application period if the committee thinks it makes sense to keep it open a little bit longer so that folks can complete all the requirements that they need to complete in order to begin taking cases.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If I might make a suggestion, and I'm thinking in part, we haven't gotten to the scheduling of our next meeting yet, but it's not unusual that we go right from our spring meeting to an early fall meeting and don't meet over the summer. What would the committee think about sort of building on the motion we already passed last meeting, kind of give this the okay? What if we just authorized the Public Defender's Office to go ahead and give a session of training using videos this summer, let them determine the dates and the method of verification for this one time, whether it's using some software that's available, or if not, if they're comfortable with the self-certification, I'd be comfortable too, at least for this one time. And then we can, in our first meeting in the fall, talk about how it went and see if it makes sense to continue doing that or to adjust the way we do it. But I would hate to tie the hands of the Public Defender's Office in being able to give this training this year over the summer when people expect it, because we don't have all the details worked out. It's really the public defender by rule that is charged with that anyway. Does the committee have a sense of their comfort with that?
I think that makes sense.
Anyone care to try to put that into the form of a motion?
So moved. I would move. I would move that the Public Defender's Office proceed with a program over the summer to allow applicants to take a video-based training program with their participation to be confirmed either through self-certification or through another method as approved by the Public Defender's Office, to be reassessed in the fall with a report back as to how the program functioned.
Second.
You said it much better than I did. Thank you, Judge Wachorowski. A second by Attorney Rakish-Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, well, the motion carries unanimously, and Attorney Hamilton, certainly if there are either issues you want to talk to your subcommittee about, as you work out the details, you're free to do that. If you think we need a meeting of the full committee and one isn't scheduled, let me know and we can work on that. But I think you sort of have the leeway, you know our thoughts, and you can go ahead and fashion something that you think will work, and then we'll evaluate it in the fall. And thank you for taking this on. And good
Of
luck.
course, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's input, and you know, I will do my best to try to address some of the concerns and be able to report back in the fall on how it went. If need be, I'll pull together the training subcommittee as well. Certainly, we'll keep everybody informed about what's happening. And the link to the registration will be posted on both judicials. I'll work with Damon as I have in the past on that. So I'll keep everybody informed and appreciate everybody's input. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. The next item of the agenda is the schedule of future meetings. And as I mentioned, you know, typically we go from the spring meeting to a fall meeting and not one in December. But let me ask if anyone believes that there's something that couldn't wait until September or October for a meeting of this committee. Anyone aware of any reason? Knowing that we could always call a meeting if something came up, but is there anything anyone knows of now? I know there are one or two complaints pending that are being investigated by the probable cause panel. And certainly if a probable cause panel, upon issuing a recommendation, felt it should be heard by the committee sooner rather than later, they can let me know that and we can schedule a meeting if need be. But absent that, is there anything else anyone can think of that would make it a bad idea to wait until the fall to meet? Damon, anything you can think of?
No, other than the other than the pending complaints, no, Judge. No, there's nothing.
So, and the next question is whether we should plan the next meeting in person or, to be safe, plan one more remotely. And for those of you who are newer to the committee, before COVID, we typically met in the Hartford courthouse on Washington Street, which in some ways wasn't the most convenient in terms of parking when it got to be, what, 4 or 4:30? But I think probably Hartford is still an easier location for most people. Is that if and when we do go back to in person? But does everyone think it makes sense to be safe and do one more virtual, or should we plan for in person? What are your thoughts?
My vote, Your Honor, would be for back in person.
Anyone?
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Yeah, I would second that. I'm a dire optimist, so I'm thinking if we do it, we'll will it to happen, and then I guess if we needed to, we could switch it. But I'm happy to do whatever the group, you know, would wish.
Does anyone have an issue doing it in person? And if there's a reason that you'd rather not discuss publicly, feel free to contact me later. But anyone feel we shouldn't try in person, at least in September or October? All right. Well, I certainly think so it's nicer to see all of you in person. It's nice to have a meeting that if a member of the public wanted to attend, they can be physically at the meeting and observe in a way that's more difficult remotely. So why don't we at least tentatively plan that the next meeting will be in Hartford? And Damon, I suppose we could talk about the location, but I'm assuming we'd probably be back in the same place unless we could think of something else. If we're in person, my recollection is we used to start at 3 or 3:30. Am I right about that?
No, Judge, we usually start around 2
Started
o'clock.
at 2?
Yeah.
2.
And we ran past, what times does the parking get? What time does the towing start? I thought it was at 4. Did we really run that late?
So if we're on Washington Street, it starts at 3:30, but if you're on Lafayette, you're good to go.
Okay, so it was 3:30. So we did start at 2. And is Monday still the best time, even if we're not remote?
Sure.
Mondays seem to work for us, yeah.
So then a Monday afternoon, I would say in the latter part of September or the early part of October. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How about September 19th or 26th or October 3rd? Does anyone have any issues with any of those dates? Why don't should we shoot for the 26th, pick the one in the middle?
Judge, I actually, it's up to the committee, but that's going to be an issue for me, because it's that's the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So
Okay, well then let's stay away from that. I think last year we had our fall meeting on looks like October 4th. Want to do October 3rd? Stick close to that. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
All right.
For me.
Then we'll plan the next meeting for Monday, October 3rd at 2 p.m. In person, barring unforeseen developments. In Hartford, most likely in the Hartford courthouse, but you'll be notified of the exact location before then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. And then the last item on the agenda is any other matters that may properly come before the committee. Does anyone have any other issues to raise at this time? If not, then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you again, Attorney Khan, for joining our committee. And thank all the rest of you for all the work you've been doing, the probable cause panels, Attorney Hamilton, and all for your wisdom and your input today. So thank you very much. We will at this time adjourn the meeting.
Nice to
Take
see
care,
you all.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.